Vice Chair of the IRC. And before we start the meeting, let's go do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, thank you all for being here. Let me introduce some people that are in as part of the commission. We have Christina Gomez, who's the deputy executive director. Stu Robinson, who's our public information officer. We have Joe Canefield, who's our legal counsel. We have Karen Herman and Shane Shields, who are our outreach representatives. And then we have Carlos Reyes, who is the Spanish interpreter. And we are required by law to be able to provide someone in here to interpret if they are unable to speak the language. So Carlos, if you do me a favor and approach the podium and do your part.
Good evening, Vice Chair Herrera. Ladies and gentlemen, commissioners, in accordance with the Voting Rights Act, an interpreter will be available at the public hearings in order to provide interpreting services that might be needed for those citizens that need interpreting services. Please contact the interpreter present at the hearing so that he or she can assist you. Now, I will repeat the script in Spanish. Vicepresidente Herrera, comisionados, damas y caballeros, de acuerdo con los derechos electorales, con la ley de los derechos electorales, un traductor e intérprete estará disponible en todas las audiencias públicas a fin de proporcionar la traducción e interpretación que pueda ser necesaria para los ciudadanos que necesiten servicios de interpretación. Por favor, contacte al intérprete presente en esta audiencia para que él o ella le pueda asistir. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. I forgot to introduce one very important person, Marty Herder, our recorder. Okay. For those of you that would like to speak, make sure that you have one of these yellow forms. And if you choose not to speak and still want to provide some comments to us, there should be a blue form. And there should be in the back, I think it's blue. Again, the yellow form to speak, the blue form if you want to provide comments to us but not speak. The next thing we'll do is we'll have Willie Desmond with Strategic Telemetry do his presentation on the second round of public hearings.
All right, thank you. My name is Willie Desmond. I work with Strategic Telemetry. We were the firm hired to provide technical mapping assistance to the Commission throughout this process. Happy to be here in Peoria tonight to present these draft maps and to hear what the public, you have to say about them. The purpose of these meetings is to hear your opinions on these draft maps. But I'm going to be giving you a little presentation on what the IRC is, the process that was used to develop these maps, and the maps themselves. So before going on to the maps, I'll start with a little background. All right. Arizona's redistricting process is governed by the Arizona State Constitution, which was amended in the year 2000 with the passage of Proposition 106. When the voters of Arizona passed Proposition 106, they created the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission and established some criteria to be used for drawing new congressional and legislative district lines. One criteria is that following the most recent census, new lines must be created to follow shifts in population. So following the 2010 census, Arizona was allocated a ninth and additional congressional district. Aside from the ninth additional congressional district, changes would have to be made anyway due to expanding and contracting populations in different areas. The criteria outlined by Proposition 106 are that all plans must comply with the United States Constitution and the Voting Rights Act. Additionally, all plans must have equal population. These first two criteria are federally mandated, so any plans that take effect anywhere in the country have to follow these criteria. The next four are Arizona-specific and in the Arizona State Constitution. So they are, to the extent practicable, districts must be compact and contiguous, respect communities of interest, use visible geographic features such as city, town, county boundaries, and undivided census tracts when possible, And you must favor competitive districts where there's no significant detriment to other goals. All right, just to give you a little bit more background on the Voting Rights Act, and then we'll show a brief video by Bruce Adelson. The Arizona's congressional and legislative districts must receive preclearance or approval from the Department of Justice or a federal court under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act before they can take effect. To get preclearance, Arizona must demonstrate that the new districts do not discriminate against minority voters in purpose or effect, which means there can be no intentional or accidental discrimination. Under Section 5, Arizona's redistricting plans cannot be retrogressive. The plans cannot weaken or reduce minority voters' rights. The presence of discrimination can be determined by analyzing both population data and election results. So now I'm going to show a brief video by Bruce Adelson. He is an attorney with Federal Compliance Consulting. He's been advising the Commission on the Voting Rights Act and the preclearance process. We've got the volume up as loud as we can, so please bear with us.
I wanted to spend a few moments with you to talk a little bit about redistricting. I was a senior attorney for the United States Department of Justice in 2002 when the department and my team objected to or blocked your legislative redistricting plan. It's very important to understand that under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which is a federal law, Arizona must obtain approval or preclearance from the Department of Justice or from a federal court in Washington, D.C. for your redistricting plan to go into effect. Under Section 5, under federal law, your redistricting plan cannot discriminate against the rights of retrogress their opportunity to elect whom they want. This is a federal requirement. The federal requirement supersedes and takes precedence over all state requirements, whether they're competitiveness, compactness, contiguity, or keeping communities of interest together. Those are all very important. But if they conflict with the Voting Rights Act and conflict with the one person, one vote requirement of the U.S. Constitution, then they must be revised. The requirements of the Voting Rights Act and one person, one vote are paramount. There cannot be any retrogression, discrimination against the rights of minority voters. If there is, the Department of Justice will not approve the redistricting plan. That's what we said when we wrote our letter in May 2002, and we objected to what the Redistricting Commission 9 years ago had done. We found that the redistricting plan, the legislative plan, had discriminated against the rights of minority voters. And under federal law, that plan could not go into effect. So that as you contemplate redistricting and look at the various maps that have been provided by the Commission, it's very important to understand that the federal requirements under our system of law and government take priority. Those requirements cannot be minimized and must be complied with for your redistricting plan to go into effect next year to enable you to have your legislative and congressional elections. I hope that my perspective as being a former federal law enforcement officer has been helpful, and I wish you continued success with your redistricting process. Thank you.
Okay, now the process of redistricting can be broken down into several steps. The first of those is establishing the commission. So the commission was created earlier this year. The commissioners were appointed following a thorough screening process, and they serve in a voluntary capacity for the state of Arizona. Following the establishment of the commission, there's a first round of public hearings where the commission goes around the state, conducts public hearings to receive people's inputs on what they want to be in the new maps. This year there was 23 public hearings around the state throughout the months of July and August. There was public testimony on things such as geography, communities of interest, minority voters' rights, and competitiveness. Following the completion of the first round of public hearings, the mapping phase begins. Per Proposition 106, the Commission must start with a blank slate. They cannot pay attention to the current districts, and they cannot look at where incumbents live. The first thing they do after starting with a blank slate is create a grid map. Now this is simply a redistricting, a new district plan that only intention is to put the population in equal sized districts in a grid-like pattern. It only meets 2 of the 6 constitutional criteria, and those are equal population and compact and contiguous districts. So once the grid maps have been created, the committee then works with those grid maps and adjusts those lines to meet the other 6 criteria and form the draft maps. So the approval of the draft maps happened on October 3rd for the congressional district map and October 10th for the legislative district map. The grid maps were adjusted over 25 times before this, or were adjusted over the course of 25 commission meetings before this in order to come up with the draft maps that we'll present today. Following completion of the draft maps, there is a 30-day public comment period and a second round of public hearings. That's why we're here tonight, and that's why you're all here today. So the purpose of this meeting is to hear your input on these maps, so I thank you for being here, and I encourage you all to speak. We're currently visiting, it says 25 towns and cities, but I believe it's actually 31 now, in order to receive the public's opinion on these maps. And this has been going on throughout the month of October and the early part of November. Following completion of the second round of public hearings, the commission will vote on final maps. Once these are done, they will be sent off to the Department of Justice for pre-clearance. And again, because Arizona is subject to Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, the district maps must be approved by the Federal Department of Justice or the federal court in Washington, D.C. before they can take effect for Arizona elections. So right now I'm going to show you a brief timeline of how the maps came to be. This is the current congressional district map. It was last used for the 2010 elections. It's being phased out now. This is one of the maps that we are working to replace following the 2010 census. Per Proposition 106, this was the starting point for those new plans, a completely blank slate. Here's the grid map that the commission selected. They asked that 2 grid maps be prepared for both the legislative and congressional districts in order to show that there are multiple ways of assembling population in a grid-like pattern. They selected option 2 for both the legislative and congressional maps. That happened in mid-August. Since then, the grid map has been adjusted over the course of 25 public meetings. What you see before you is the completed draft map. Some highlights include 2 primarily rural districts, 3 border districts, 3 districts in the greater Tucson area, 5 districts that are entirely within Maricopa County. The map avoids splitting Arizona's Indian reservations, and there are 2 districts where minority voters should have the opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. Looking at the legislative district map, this is the current map as it sits now. This will be replaced for the 2012 election. Again, we started with a blank slate. The first step was to assemble the population in a grid-like pattern. Again, over the course of 25 meetings, the commission arrived at this draft map. Some things to note are that because of population growth over the last decade, some of the previous legislative districts had wildly divergent populations. The smallest districts had about 155,000 people in them. The largest districts now had 378,000 people in them. So some districts were more than twice as big as others. This current draft map has a deviation of from about 207,000 to around 215,000. Again, to comply with the Voting Rights Act, the draft plan includes 10 districts in which the minority voters should have the opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. And the draft also includes 3 districts wholly within Pima County and 3 additional southern Arizona districts. It has 17 districts primarily within Maricopa County and 9 districts that are primarily rural. Okay, again, the purpose of this meeting is to hear your input, so thank you again for being here. You're welcome to speak on anything you feel is important for the commission to know. Possible things to speak about are the constitutional criteria, the draft congressional or the draft legislative map. If you don't feel comfortable speaking tonight, we also encourage you to fill out one of the blue public input forms at the back of the room and turn those into a member of the staff. That your comments are also recorded onto the record and taken into account by the commissioners as they do this mapping. Additionally, you can visit our website at www.azredistricting.org and fill out some comments, or you can call the office at 602-542-5221 or toll free at 855-733-7478. Now, we would encourage you to visit our website. There's a lot of other things you can do besides submit public input. Some of the red arrows here show some of the important features. The first is the meetings tab. Under there, you can gain information about future meetings, times, and locations. You can also go back and watch videos of all the meetings that have happened so far. So if you're curious how these maps came to be, you can go back and watch as the commission developed them in public meetings. You can also submit public input there, and probably most importantly, you can go and click on the Maps tabs at the top or the bottom and view these draft maps. If you do that, it'll take you to a page that looks very much like this. The maps are available in many formats: PDFs, JPEG files, also Google Maps. There's population data tables, reports that list the different cities and which district they're in, reports that tell you how many splits there are of municipalities and census tracts, and there's also mapping files if you have your own software and you'd like to play around with them. Again, I'm sorry if anyone is here tonight and was not able to use the maps that were provided to find what they needed. But one thing I do want to show you is the Google Maps tab on here. It's circled in red. If you click on that, it takes you to a page that looks a lot like this. What you're able to do with this is zoom in and out all the way down to the individual household level. You can see your street, your block, your neighborhood. You can follow the borders so you can see exactly where they are. You can really see what comprises these maps. The buttons on the left allow you to turn the shading on and off, the county lines on and off. And it's a relatively intuitive way for you to explore these maps and see how they're put together. You are able to zoom in, as shown here. You can get much more detailed than this. I believe this is an area in Maricopa County, but you can zoom down much, much further. So, again, that's available on our website at www.azredistricting.org. Also there, you can draw your own maps. There's a public online mapping tool where it allows you to move boundaries and see how it affects population. You can start with a blank slate, you can start with the grid maps, you can start with these draft maps and really drill down and see the intricacies of trying to build these maps. You can also watch the current and past meetings, and you can get updates on future meetings. If you'd like to stay connected, you can follow us on Twitter at #AIRC, or you can friend us on Facebook. So with that, I'll just close by saying we appreciate you hosting us tonight. Please feel free to approach me or any member of the staff after the meeting. We're more than happy to answer your questions, and if we can't answer them, we'll certainly do our best to find an answer for you. We look forward to hearing your comments, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Desmond. As Mr. Desmond had stated, the purpose for these meetings are to hear your opinions, the areas on the maps that you want us to change, what areas you want us to keep the same. So this is your time for you to voice your concerns, and not a time for us to address any issues, but a time for us to listen to you, the audience. And again, the yellow forms, if you wish to speak, please do so by completing these forms. We'll give each speaker 3 minutes. You'll be able to see when the time is up there. I think if it turns green, you have, Stu, can you let me know? Okay, so it'll be green, and then it'll turn yellow when it's 1 minute left. Mm-hmm. And obviously red when you are finished with your 3 minutes. And what I want to do is maximize all the public comments. So please, I will stick to the 3 minutes. So you have your warning up there. I think 3 minutes is plenty. And let's go ahead and get started. When you come up, Marty would like you to, and we would like you to spell your first and last name, speak slowly, tell us who you represent, and the town or city you're from. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first presenter is Dorothy Ward, representing herself from Phoenix. Ma'am, right here.
I'm Dorothy Ward. My last name is spelled W-A-R-D. I'm representing myself. I live in central Phoenix, and I am most concerned that the district map proposed in the October 10th Arizona Republic be adopted. I think it's a wonderful map with 710,000 people in each district, and hopefully the Native Americans being able to have a representative in Congress. I want to thank each of the commissioners for accepting a position, knowing what a contentious situation it would be. I particularly want to acknowledge the chairman's position. I guess she's not here tonight, but I think she has done a superb job, and I think Governor Brewer is absolutely wrong in trying to get her ousted. She has done nothing wrong. I hope she sleeps well at night, knowing that she's been doing the right thing, because she certainly has. I think all of you should be commended, and particularly her. Thank you.
See, still 1 minute and 44 seconds left. Okay. Next speaker, and if I mispronounce somebody's name, I apologize in advance. Rivko Knox is our next speaker.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is R-I-V-K-O, my first name. Last name is Knox, K-N-O-X. I'm representing myself. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and as I've said at prior meetings, I live in the same house that I have for almost 40 years, except I've been moved from district to district. First, I wanted to thank all of you. I'm sorry, both the staff and the commissioners. I am sorry that there's only one commissioner here. I had hoped hoped this would be the last meeting I would speak at, but it looks like nobody knows exactly what the future is going to be. I am not a data person, so I'm not here to speak on any specifics. I am primarily here to say that my main focus has continued to be on competitiveness, and the numbers do seem to indicate that it's not going to turn out to be the most competitive of maps. Having said that, I would also like to say that with all that I'm not 100% happy with the maps the way they are, I recognize it's a really difficult balancing act. You move one thing, you move another. It's my understanding that the recent judge has indicated that all the criteria are basically to be considered equal except for the two mandatory ones by federal law. The community of interest has been used in so many different ways, and I'm not going to say there are no such things as community of interest, but they can be absolutely used to just say anything you want to say, and I've heard too many comments about communities of interest that I almost want to laugh about. And finally, I would like to say that I am very disturbed, even with my comments about the final maps, I'm very, very disturbed at what has happened to the process. I think the process has worked very well. Like I say, I've attended 4 hearings, I've submitted comments. Legislators have attended meetings, public hearings like everybody else, and their comments have been heard as well as everybody else's. The removal of the attempt to remove the removal of the chair, I think, is a real travesty of the concept of an independent redistricting commission. And I am hopeful that this will not stand, and I'm hopeful that even though no final maps have been issued, to remove somebody without any proof of cause, without any due process, is extremely disturbing. And thank you very much for your time.
Our next speaker is Glenn Jacquez, representing the Arizona Competitive District Coalition from Phoenix.
I'm Glenn Jacques, G-L-E-N-N, Jacques, J-A-C-Q-U-E-S. I'm the winner of the Arizona Competitive Districting Coalition, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I have submitted to my commission both my maps that won the Arizona Competitive District Coalition contest, both the congressional and legislative. I've submitted those via the website, and you have a copy of both of those. Competitive districts can be obtained while preserving community of interest. If you take a look at the congressional map that I submitted, you'll notice that it has 5 competitive districts. 3 of those are in Maricopa County. One of those includes much of central Phoenix and the northern parts of Phoenix, and another one includes much of Tempe and Mesa. There's also 2 more rural districts that are competitive both on the eastern portions of Arizona. If you take a look at the legislative map that I submitted to the commission, it has 7 competitive districts. It also protects community of interest while meeting all the voting rights acts. In taking a look at your legislative map, I feel that you did a good job of creating some competitive districts, but additional ones can be created while fixing some of the community of interest that have been split. For example, if you take a look at your draft map for the legislature, district number 28 in north central Phoenix, you could give some of those Democrats to the South Scottsdale area. This would make the Scottsdale district more competitive, and it also may lead you to be able to make a more competitive district in the northwest part of Phoenix. I'd like to thank the commission for all the work they've done so far and in their attempt to create both maps. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Bill Stough, S-T-O-U-G-H, representing himself from Goodyear.
Commissioner, my name is Bill Stough, S-T-O-U-G-H. I'm a resident of Goodyear, Arizona. And as I look at your legislative draft map here, I'm concerned about the fact that we split Goodyear in half. The north side goes into one district, 13, and the other part of Goodyear goes into the Yuma district, which is 4. Now, I know that there's been some subject about community interest being overdone, but it would seem to me that the south side of the residents in Goodyear have really nothing in common with the people in Yuma. That's a long way away, and I think the only time they go to Yuma in that area is when they go to California or they go down to Mexico to buy their medicine. But it would seem to me that by putting Goodyear back together, that we'd have more of a lock there for community interest as opposed to the way you've drafted it now. I don't understand the logic of why it was split in half to start with, because I don't see any other, as I look at your map here, I don't see any other cities of that size being split like that. So I would hope that you would go back and take a second look at that and try to pull the city of Goodyear together so that we would be in one district. Plus the fact we have some representatives that have represented us very well in the state legislature, and I would like to see them remain in the districts that they're in now as opposed to going into other districts. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Shirley McAllister, representing herself.
My name is Shirley McAllister, S-H-I-R-L-E-Y, M-C, capital A-L-L-I-S-T-E-R. I'm Shirley McAllister of Sun City and a resident of Arizona for 15 years after being here 3 years longer as a winter visitor. I've attended several of these sessions, including being present during 4 days while the commission was drawing the new district lines. I am appalled at the action taken by the governor and Republicans in the Arizona legislature regarding Chairman Mathis and the work of the commission. Surely they did not attend any of these sessions, or they could not have made some of the statements I've read in the press. It is also unfortunate that one commissioner, Mr. Freeman, has given statements to the press that are inaccurate. His comments were printed in the Daily News Sun, our local paper. Although I do not agree with all the boundaries set by the commission, my observations have shown no bias on the part of the chair nor of the staff. Partisan commissioners have worked to achieve district lines to favor their political party, and that was to be expected. Some public comment has been designed to subvert one of the restrictions of the law, that of not considering the residence of elected officials. For example, the Republicans of the West Valley have sought lines that would include a current legislator and have been open to citing that as the reason for requesting that Peoria and Sun City be a part of the same district. The alternative of combining Sun City with Sun City West, two communities who have more in common, was spoken against so that Sun City would have the eastern connection. The commission did not act contrary to the law in meeting this request. They were responding to public comment regarding communities of interest. I regret that politics has come to play such an ugly role in the redistricting process. All the citizens of Arizona, including me, was to have more competitive districts. I believe the commission has sought to accomplish that goal while also working within the constraints of equal population and voting rights district. Contiguous districts, compact districts, and districts of community of interest have also been goals. Not all of these goals can be met perfectly. Competition with as many districts as possible is essential for the better governance in Arizona. The actions of the governor and Arizona Senate yesterday demonstrate what the lack of competitiveness has wrought in Arizona.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Lynn Pancrazzi, State Representative from the great city of Yuma.
Good evening again.
Good evening.
Lynn Pancrazzi, L-Y-N-N-E, I finally remembered, Pancrazzi, P-A-N-C-R-A-Z-I. And I am the state rep for Yuma, District 24. First, let me thank the commission for the hard work and the service that you've given to the state of Arizona. I, too, am opposed to what happened at the legislature last night, and the governor and members of the Senate being involved in what is supposed to be an independent redistricting committee. And I, too, do not like the draft maps, as several have, but I feel like this is the forum to voice my concerns, and it is not at the state legislature. First of all, rural Arizona does not want to be attached to metropolitan Phoenix, Goodyear, and Goodyear, as you heard, does not want to be attached to Yuma. The needs of rural Arizona are quite different from those of the metropolitan area. So I asked that the commission please keep rural Arizona separate from metropolitan Phoenix and Tucson. Second, La Paz County has been represented by the Yuma legislature since before it was a county, as it used to be part of Yuma County, and wish to stay with Yuma County. I do know that the Arizona Strip wants to be part of District 5, proposed District 5, Mojave County. So I would like the commission to consider swapping those two and bringing La Paz down to District 13. Third, if you're unable to keep Yuma County and La Paz County together in one district and still meet all the federal and state requirements that you're supposed to, then please keep Maricopa, all of Maricopa out of District 13 except for Buckeye and Gila Bend, and put these together with the La Paz County and District 13 so that we have a rural representation, then add parts of Santa Cruz to District 4, and we will remain being represented by rural legislators, and the voice of rural Arizona will still be heard at the Capitol. And with that, I want to thank you, and it's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again. Thank you. Next speaker is James, I think it's Hawksworthy or Hawksworth, pastor. I probably butchered your last name.
That's all right.
Sorry about that.
I don't know how Hawksworthy gets in there, but it does sometimes. But it's Hawksworth, Hoxworth. Good evening.
Good evening.
How you doing?
I'm doing great.
All right. Well, it is kind of a crazy time that we're under, isn't it? But I tried to get in at Tempe back in the day, but it was a little bit rushed and wasn't able to speak then. So I got a chance now. So thank you very much for hearing me. My name is James Hawksworth. I am a pastor at Camelback Bible Church, which is located at 40th Street and Stanford Drive, just north of Camelback Road. We have a growing and unique congregation serving the neighborhoods of the Biltmore, North and Northeast Phoenix, Arcadia, as well as the town of Paradise Valley, where we're located. When I read, this was unique to me, when I looked at the selected congressional draft maps, I was curious how this would impact the civically minded parishioners in our congregation. I was surprised, and I realized that your maps have the immediate neighborhood of Camelback Bible Church in one congressional district, while we are closely surrounded on all four sides, including less than 500 feet to the east, by an entirely different congressional district, which is based in the East Valley. With this configuration, our parishioners who would even walk to church would be walking from one congressional district to another on their walk, and then if they're walking down Stanford Drive, you could be back again in the same, or a different, congressional district. It seemed as though almost a small pocket was carved out without consideration of how it would be excessively splitting the neighborhood. In one of my roles, I serve there as pastor of small groups and young adults, so we're encouraging our parishioners to serve our community, especially through volunteering, and also keeping on track of prominent issues and thinking about how it may impact them, regardless of our party affiliation, since we are nonpartisan. And so it's our request that you would keep the neighborhoods surrounding our church at 40th Street and Stanford in the same congressional district. Looking at the configuration of the draft that has been drawn, we feel it would be important to keep the neighborhoods of our parishioners together and link with North Phoenix, Paradise Valley by including the neighborhoods surrounding our church together in the North Phoenix district, which you have created. And it would seem to kind of, again, follow with the idea of keeping everything compact and contiguous, keeping the communities of interest united, and also using just geographic features such as the town boundaries, etc. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Jeanette Dubrail, and I know I'm not pronouncing your last name correctly, so I apologize.
All right, I'm a little bit shorter than everybody else here. So, good evening. My name is Jeanette Dubrail, D-U-B-R-E-I-L, and I would like to speak to you about the legislative district, the proposed district that I will be living in, and that is the new proposed LD 22. And I did provide some maps to your staff when I signed in to speak. LD 22 is in the Northwest Valley. It encompasses parts of Phoenix, Glendale, Peoria, and Sun City. For the most part, the district is very compact and contiguous and is drawn pretty much to my liking. I would like to make some very small recommendations that would help improve the constitutional requirements. There's a little segment up north that is in Yavapai County, and I think it has like 7 voters. So if we remove that one voting precinct, that contains or confines the LD 22 to one county. Also, currently, it is drawn with a segment that goes over the I-17 around the town of Anthem and picks up New River from in between Anthem and Cave Creek. I would like to use the I-17 as the eastern boundary. Again, it's a good natural geographic that would define the eastern boundary of LD 22 very well. Also, one of my main concerns is the northern portion of the new LD 20. That is the Happy Valley communities. They're north of the Thunderbird Mountain recreational area and the Adobe Dam. And I don't know if they gave you my maps, but basically LD 20 goes north, and this area, the Adobe Dam and Thunderbird Mountain, cut off these communities from the rest of their district. Currently, those communities are part of Legislative District 4, which is where we are now, and I'm requesting that they be put into the new LD 22. When you use the I-17 boundary and you cut off the New River portion, and then you bring in those Happy Valley communities of Stetson Hills, the population pretty much balances itself out. So we are within 1% of the population, and as for the competitiveness factor, it doesn't have any significant impact on voter registration figures. So I just ask that you take those into consideration, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. You know, don't be afraid to clap for people. You can do that. Larry Templeton is our next speaker, representing himself.
Okay, I'm Larry Templeton, Larry-Templeton. I live in Surprise, where I have lived since 2004. Whenever I decided to live in Arizona, I picked a community that I wanted to be in, and Surprise was it. I hear a rumor is floating around that they want to split Surprise in half. I definitely want that not to happen. Now, as far as an eastern boundary, I believe 17 would make a really good natural boundary to go there. But whatever you do, keep Surprise together as a unit. You should try to do that with all cities. But anyway, I didn't choose to live in a region. I chose a particular section. Now, I think another thing has been overemphasized, and that's the competitiveness. The reason I think that is because when you look at statewide, the voter registration is within 5% of the Republicans with the Democrats, and the rest of them are pretty much independent. Therefore, I think that competitiveness has been overemphasized in the maps they're trying to do. I think it should be communities of interest that are emphasized, because that's where we all choose to live, the community we want to live in. And it might be a retirement community, it might be a work community, but whatever that is, we should stay with that. And then a final comment. I'm totally in support of what the governor did and what the Senate did, simply because the way I understand it, we got a chairman that was married to a Democratic fundraiser, and I don't think she was unbiased. Therefore, we need to do something different. Thank you.
Next speaker is Jackie Rose, representing herself.
Hello, I'm Jackie Rose, Jacquie, Rose, R-O-S-E. I've lived in District 9 for almost 10 years. I'm horrified by what Governor Brewer and the legislature did yesterday to Commissioner Mathis, and I want to thank the commission for continuing to do the work for which you were appointed under tremendous pressure. I think you've been brave and valiant in this effort, and we appreciate your efforts and your determination. Our military is fighting wars to bring democracy to the people of Iraq, Afghanistan, and now Libya. But at the same time, our state leaders are trying to take our democracy away from us. You are Arizona's last defense against a fascist state. Despite the governor's efforts, fair and competitive redistricting is important for the future of our state and will determine the direction the state takes for the next decade. Without competitive districts, there is no fair representation for the majority of residents. It's difficult to get good candidates to run for office when they don't have a chance of winning. Furthermore, a lack of competitive districts hurts public participation in government. People feel that since they do not have a representative in government who shows an interest in their opinions, they drop out of the political process. This lack of participation can destroy a democracy. I'm cutting it short. Okay. I have lived in different states in different areas of the country, as well as Washington, D.C., before moving to Arizona. With the exception of the time I spent in Washington, where there is no representation in Congress, this is the first time that I have felt that I have no representation in both the state legislature and in Congress. My representatives and senators do not share my values or views in any area of civic or civil thinking. In fact, when I write my congressmen and senators or try to lobby for an issue at their office, their staffs have said on more than one occasion that they only represent the people who voted for them. Furthermore, when I write to them, I receive an automatic response that asks me to prove that I'm one of their constituents. This is not the way an elected official should represent their constituents, whether you voted for them or not. They don't care. They know that without competitive districts, they will be reelected no matter what they say or do. It's important that you listen to the people of Arizona rather than special interest groups or organizations which are promoting their own interests rather than the interests of the people of Arizona. I thank you for your efforts and also for your time and attention this evening. Thank you.
Ma'am. Can you guys do me a favor? When someone's speaking, whether you agree with them or not, please don't laugh. Don't make any comments, because I guarantee you wouldn't appreciate it done to you. So please keep your comments to yourself. If you want to clap, that's great. But anything else, I'm not going to tolerate that. So thank you. Our next speaker is Roma Thomas, representing herself.
My name's Roma Thomas, R-O-M-A-T-H-O-M-A-S. I'm from Sun City West. I've lived there about 14 years. And I'm representing myself and the United States of America. If we want to believe in the rule of law in our U.S. Constitution, I feel that redistricting has not been done properly over a number of years. All you need to do is go to Article 1 of our U.S. Constitution, which says that representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within the Union according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons. And I emphasize free. What has happened in the United States is the prison gerrymandering has gone on. In the 2010 census, for instance, there were 2 million people that were counted in the wrong place. We have down here, for instance, down here in Florence, in Pinal County, they have lumped all the prisoners there into Legislative District 8. But some of these prisoners could be easily transferred to another district. Actually, by law, I think, the way I interpret the Constitution is that those people that are not free should be counted in their own district where they first came from. This happens in New York State. So many prisoners are from New York City are sent up to Upper New York State to prison. It skews that representative district in New York. And it happens here in Arizona. We have lots of prisoners down in Florence. We have lots of prisoners in Kingman. It skews the system. The non-voting of the prison population in a particular legislative district would lead those that can actually vote into a hyper-majority by virtue of having many prisoners in a particular legislative district who wouldn't be voting or who cannot vote. As I say, we want to abide by the rule of law and keep this an independent commission, then we should be abiding by the U.S. Constitution, and all those prisoners counted in the Florence area or whatever and throughout the state, they should be put back into their own home district. We have a lot of Hawaiian prisoners here, for instance. They should be back in Hawaii counted. It's just not fair, and I believe in fairness and justice. Thanks to the commissioners. I just hope this helps.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker is Alvin Vaughn, citizen of Peoria. Thank you, sir. That'll save us 3 minutes. Okay, our next speaker is Lisa Gray, Chairman LD number 9, representing Sun City, Peoria, and Glendale.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Gray, L-I-S-A-G-R-A-Y. First, I just want to thank the Commission for LD9, and actually we are going to be the new LD21. A bunch of us came and spoke on behalf of what we were hoping would take place, and you guys really did a great job with the district, so I really want to thank you for that. There are just a couple things that I'd like to bring to your attention to maybe try to clean up a couple little things. The first thing is I would recommend that we remove El Mirage from the district, and the reason being is because that's part of the Dysart School District, and that actually splits Dysart and puts another school district into LD9 or LD21. Also, El Mirage is more of a community of interest with Surprise. All the shopping and everything takes place in that area. The other thing is I would recommend if we remove El Mirage that we go north and we go up to Beardsley and the 101. We would take in Westbrook Village, which is a community of interest to Sun City because they are both retirement communities and they also use the same shopping amenities. Also, by going north, we keep Peoria School District more intact. The other thing that I would recommend is that we bring back the area from Cactus to Olive to the 51, and we use 51st as a border. And I recommend that because that corner is Peoria School District. So when you took that out, it actually puts Peoria into another school district. So I would encourage that. And then finally, if you were to use Agua Fria River that separates Youngtown and El Mirage, that's a natural boundary, and that's kind of where we are right now. So that separates it out. So those are a few of the changes that I would recommend to this district. The other thing I just want to say is that I too want to say that I believe that there's been an overemphasis on competitiveness. You know, if we remember prior to 2011, 5 congressional seats belonged to Democrats. The governor was a Democrat, and the attorney general was a Democrat. So I think that competitiveness has played out. And the final thing is when you look at Prop 106, which is part of our Arizona Constitution, which we are bound to follow, which was voted by the people. There are 6 goals for this commission, and the final one states, and we've talked about other ones, we've talked about the geographical compactness and the boundaries and stuff, but the final one says, to the extent practical, competitive districts should be favored where to do so would create no significant detriment to the other goals. So that is the final goal. That's not, the other goals above that play into being first and foremost. So I just ask that you would keep that in mind as you continue on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker is Jim Maliki, representing himself.
Good evening. My name is Jim Maliki, J-I-M-M-A-L-I-C-K-I. I live in Phoenix, what will be LD20, maybe, currently LD10. I guess I'd start out by saying maybe the best evidence that you guys have done a good job is nobody's really happy, quite frankly. Keep in mind that although I'm not going to compare it to the Declaration of Independence, but Thomas Jefferson actually got stuck with the job because Benjamin Franklin realized that he didn't want to put forth a document that would be held under such scrutiny. So thanks for getting stuck with it. Thanks for the work that you guys are doing, by all means. And what a job you have done. Now, a basic tenet of our founding fathers is that for the best form of American democracy to exist, public participation and civic discourse must be evident. Redistricting offers a unique opportunity that only happens every 10 years that can promote that civic discourse by enhancing competitiveness. Yesterday, such civic discourse, and thus a basic tenet of American democracy, has been stifled through the actions of the governor and the state senate. I am a Democrat, and I am proud to say so. And I put forth that through competitiveness, we as a state will realize the best elected officers. I hear from Republicans that free market should be promoted to have a healthy economy and government should have minimal influence. Then doesn't it make sense that in the realm of ideas and debate, we also have a free market in order to have the best candidates to elect for office? We should promote competitiveness and not try to predetermine Republican and Democrat seats in order to keep the powers that be in place. Why do we fear debate? Why do the powers that be want to keep those people quiet, silenced? In closing, I speak to the independents, of which there are many, to consider that for future elections, that as you cast your ballots, keep in mind that the governor and Republicans in the state senate are doing their utmost to make sure your votes don't count.
Next speaker is Joan Spittler, chairperson for the Northwest Valley Democrats.
I'm Joan Spittler, Joanspittler. I'm from Sun City West, and I'm representing myself. I'm in LD4. I'd like to thank the commission for their hard work. The fact that they're volunteers, they have certainly worked very hard to make this a fair and independent redistricting. I too, as others have said, am deeply concerned about the chairman of this committee being removed yesterday by the Republican Congress and the governor. In LD4, we have been outnumbered 2-1 for many years. In the new redistricting plan, we are still outnumbered and not fairly represented. Our voices have been silenced for too long by one-party rule. Our ideas and values are still not represented. On behalf of the Northwest Valley Democrats, I ask the Commission to work toward real fairness and competitiveness in the new LD4. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Bill Mitchell, representing himself from Maricopa County.
Bill Mitchell, M-I-T-C-H-E-L-L. Vice Chair Herrera, nice to see you again. And to the staff, I really appreciate the things you've done. And in spite of what I say, I really like you all, really do. And it's interesting to hear so many constitutional experts this evening and the active judiciary that's gone before me. The Commission, no doubt, has a challenging task, especially since the voters of the state have put so much faith in this Commission. Your product is a reflection of all of you, of each of you, and the result of leadership or lack of it. What it should not be is a reflection of anything other than the constitutional requirements. We've all seen the valid criticism of various newspaper editorials and community organizations regarding the CDs and LD maps. So I won't repeat those observations, but I'd like to take you back to the IRC's record of October the 3rd, at which I was present. Up to that point, I had either attended or watched a number of the sessions online. In one of my first statements to the Commission, I indicated that as a citizen, all I was looking for was fairness and political neutrality from the Commission. Fairness was following and applying Article 4, Part 2, Section 1, Paragraphs 14, A through F of our state constitution. Fairness was not to be defined as, in quotes, to think either party could win, as stated by the chairman in that session on October the 3rd, 44 minutes into the session. This October 3rd session is important to follow because the CD draft map, which in my view was not complete at the time, was adopted. At 6 minutes and 52 seconds into the meeting, the chair said she wanted to get a third competitive district out of Maricopa County. At about 34 minutes and 24 seconds into the meeting, Commissioner Freeman said he still didn't really understand how competitiveness was being defined. At about 48 minutes and 22 seconds into the meeting, answering a question from Commissioner Stearns, the chair said that she wanted to adopt the map. At about 51 minutes, Commissioner Stearns stated that he didn't have the algorithms or really understood how competitiveness was being defined. There was a theme here that I saw developing and sitting and watching the people. Commissioner Freeman already made a similar statement and added to these comments at about 53 minutes. It was clear that this map was sprung upon both those commissioners. Commissioner Herrera had to leave. We had to go to a meeting. They took a break and then went to public comment. After public comment at around 180-minute mark, Commissioner Stearns spoke about competitiveness, stating it wasn't adding up. CD won 35,000 more Democrats, but it was showing up as competitive. It wasn't. CD2 competitive, but showed no registration advantage. More Republicans were added into CDs 4, 5, 6, and 8, which seemed like packing more than anything. And Commissioner Sturts repeated the statement that he was interested in competitiveness. Well, I see my time's expired. The last thing I want to say is going after this round two, as you go back into session to tweak the maps, they need more than a tweak. They need to be redrawn, keeping the citizens and their communities of interest ahead of what determined the results of October the 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Jean McGrath, representing herself, and it says the Honorable Jean McGrath, so I will call her that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jean, Jean McGrath, MC, capital Grath. I'm very concerned about the communities of interest and the compactness of the districts. I'm especially concerned with the present-day Legislative District 12, It encompasses parts of Glendale, Litchfield Park, Estrella, Avondale, Goodyear, Pebble Creek, and the current districts that you have it drawn into are Legislative District 4 and Legislative District 13. The majority of the population in those districts are in the east end of each one of those districts, close to Phoenix and the suburban communities there. It is 170 miles from the eastern end of those districts down to Yuma. I cannot imagine where you envision these legislative districts having their legislative district meetings. I think that you will be treating the citizens of Yuma in a very poor fashion because we're very active out here in the West Valley. We will outnumber them, and I don't think that they will ever get to attend a district meeting unless they want to fly in. These maps very badly need to be redrawn when you take in LD4 and LD13 because you have eliminated communities of interest, and you've also ignored compactness, which is one of the requirements in the state constitution. I thank you for your attentiveness and for your hard work on this commission.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker is Anna Huberman, representing herself.
My name is Anna, A-N-N-A, Huberman, H-U-B-E-R-M-A-N. I would like to say that I'm mostly concerned about the competitiveness of the districts. I'm concerned that the districts don't represent the diversity of the population of Arizona, and they don't represent the political reality of Arizona. I am appalled by what Governor Brewer's actions, yesterday, but I'm even more appalled by what the senators did. They submitted blindly to the governor's will and voted in block, without debate and without consideration to their constituents or to the will of the voters, who were the people who actually voted to establish this commission. The irony is that if this commission were allowed to actually be independent, it would lead to competitive districts, which would assure better candidates and consequently better elected officials. Or maybe that's the point. I encourage you to relook at the legislative district maps to assure more competitiveness. I do like to thank you for the hard work that you've put in this, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, ma'am. Our next speaker is Garrett Simpson, representing himself.
Good evening. My name is Garrett Simpson, G-A-R-R-E-T-T, Simpson, S-I-M-P-S-O-N. I'd like to thank the Commission for this thankless job it's undertaken, Mr. Chairman, gentlemen. And I share the concerns about the lack of competitiveness that seems to be called for by our governor and the state Senate. Now, it may be true that competitiveness is the last consideration in the Arizona constitutional scheme for redistricting, but competitiveness to me is most congruent with the highest aspirations of equal protection as set out in the 14th Amendment and in the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Non-competitive districts are less than democratic and tend to sequester people in a way that dilutes the votes of minorities and people of color and different economic levels. And so it tends to enhance the entrenchment of power. And I think that's what happened yesterday to our chairman, is that she was removed not because of misconduct, but because the state Senate and our governor didn't like the result. And that's unfortunate, but that's why we have an independent commission to put a barrier between political expediency and an important and politically consequential act, which redistricting certainly is. And so we came out here from Glendale, where we live, to express our solidarity with the independence of this independent commission and our support for Ms. Mathis and our objection to the deplorable action taken yesterday by the governor and the state Senate. And that we hope whatever product does come from this is one that honors Arizona and doesn't continue the sorry reputation we have that has landed us on the Voting Rights Act watch list for many years. We hope that someday can be lifted in good conscience. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You have our next speaker is Representative Jack Harper.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Chairman. I guess technically you might actually be the co-chairman at this time. My name is State Representative Jack Harper, H-A-R-P-E-R. I'm not here representing an organization or representing my own self-interest, but I think technically for the congressional districts to be constitutional, they have to be more compact. I believe that districts 4 and 12 have an unmistakable appearance of being gerrymandered. But I do not have an opinion on what would be a community of interest in a congressional district. I think so many communities are in the average size of a congressional district. It's hard for me to define. As far as legislative districts, I agree with the Republican Party chairwoman from current Legislative District 4, Jeanette Dubray. The area east of I-17 that has been included in LD 22 has nothing in common really with the rest of LD 22 since the Whitman area was drawn out of it. So if by chance the commission sees fit, I support the map drawn by GOP Jet on your website. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This is our last speaker. Actually, we have at least one more. We have our next speaker is Maureen Bayardi, representing herself from Phoenix.
Thank you for listening to me once again. I've attended many of these meetings. My name is Maureen, M-A-U-R-E-E-N, Bayardi, B-A-Y-A-R-D-I. I am here once again to talk about competitiveness. In attending these meetings, it seems to me that the weight of competitiveness has overpowered the other criteria that are mandated that we have for this process. It's been hammered, competitiveness, competitiveness, competitiveness. And I think that we need to take a look at the other criteria as well. And one of the issues that I personally find that needs to be considered are the communities of interest. We buy our places, our homes, or rent, whatever the case may be, in areas that we want to live. We're thinking there about it's where we live, where we shop, where we worship, and where we socialize. And enough attention has not been given to this. It's not just something convenient. It's who we are as a people. And I also support the governor and the senators in removing Commissioner Mathis. And I feel that way because I find it very difficult to believe that she can truly be independent in view of the fact that her husband is very involved with the Democrat Party in Southern Arizona. I just don't know how that can be. And so I thank you once again for listening to me, and I hope you all have a good evening.
Last speaker is Jeffrey Tucker. Save just another 3 minutes. Thank you. I think that is it. So definitely want to thank the city of Peoria for hosting us. In particular, I have her name here somewhere, Claudia Lujan from the city of Peoria for organizing this meeting along with our staff. And we will be next. If you feel like you have to make more comments, and you definitely can do so, we will be in Scottsdale tomorrow at 6 p.m. On Friday, we'll be in the town of Sells, followed by Marana at 6 p.m. I think it's Marana. And I have, let me see what else. Green Valley on Saturday, and Casa Grande later that day at 3:30. So I can thank you. Let me just say by saying I voted for Prop 106, and I think quite a few of you that did, if you were living in Arizona at the time. And political parties do change. The governor, we used to have a Democrat governor, and I think the people that are favoring what the governor did. If the tables were turned and it was a Democratic governor doing that to what you guys perceive to be a right-leaning independent, you guys would be outraged. So I don't want this to happen to anyone, not a Republican, not a Democrat, not an independent. This is the Independent Redistricting Commission, and it should stay independent. So, thank you all, and have a good night. 7:20. Sorry about that.